There are two ways to watch House of the Dragon. The first is to watch what happens. The second is to watch what people believe is happening. Episode 6 opens with a field full of dead rivermen. The soldiers ask a simple question. Who killed them? At first, it sounds like the beginning of a mystery. But by the end of the episode, you realize that question was never really about the bodies. Because episode 6 is filled with people making life-changing decisions based on things they only think they understand. Rhaenyra believes she can still protect her claim without becoming the kind of ruler she despises. Aemond believes fear is enough to hold a kingdom together. Criston Cole believes experience has taught him how this war works. And every one of them is missing part of the picture. That's what makes this one of the smartest episodes of the season. It isn't asking who has the bigger dragon, or who wins the next battle. It's asking something much more dangerous. What happens when every leader believes they're fighting the same war? When in reality, they're fighting completely different ones. Hey everyone, welcome back to Ghostframe. If you enjoy deep analysis, hidden details, and storytelling breakdowns, make sure to subscribe because every week we dive beneath the surface of House of the Dragon. Today, we're breaking down episode 6 from a completely different perspective. Not by asking who made the right decision, but by asking whether any of these characters truly understand the war they're fighting anymore. Let's start with the scene that quietly tells us everything we need to know. A battlefield. A few unanswered questions. And a trap that perfectly foreshadows the rest of the episode. The opening scene gives us a mystery. Now episode 6 gives us something even more dangerous. A disagreement no one seems to notice. When Rhaenyra's council gathers, everyone appears to be discussing the same problem. How should they respond? But if you listen carefully, they're not having the same conversation at all. Some of her advisors want immediate retaliation. To them, this is simple. Strike first. Strike hard. End the threat before it grows. From a military perspective, that makes perfect sense. But then Rhaenyra says something that completely changes the conversation. A queen who murders loyal subjects cannot be trusted. Notice what just happened. Her council is talking about winning a war. Rhaenyra is talking about deserving a throne. Those aren't the same objective. And that's why this scene is so important. Most viewers see a queen refusing a military strategy. I think the writers are showing us something much deeper. Rhaenyra understands that every decision she makes is being watched. Not just by her enemies, but by the very people she's asking to follow her. If she answers every act of violence with even greater violence, she may win today's battle, but lose the moral authority that separates her from the people she's fighting. That's why another line in this scene matters just as much. When the prophecy is mentioned, Rhaenyra doesn't answer with strategy. She answers with memory. My father would abhor it. She's still measuring her decisions against Viserys' ideals. While almost everyone around her has already accepted that this war has changed the rules. And that's the real conflict inside this room. It's not blacks versus greens. It's two completely different visions of leadership. One believes a ruler earns loyalty through restraint. The other believes survival justifies whatever comes next. Episode 6 never tells us which side is right. But it quietly asks a fascinating question. Can a ruler remain honorable after the war has already stopped being honorable? If Rhaenyra is trying to protect her legitimacy, then Aemond is trying to protect his authority. At first glance, those ideas seem almost identical. But episode 6 makes an important distinction. Authority can force obedience. Legitimacy inspires loyalty. And those are not the same thing. One of the most revealing parts of this episode isn't a battle. It's the atmosphere inside the Green Camp. People follow Aemond's commands, but listen carefully to the conversations around him. There's hesitation. There's caution. And, more importantly, there's fear. Not fear of the enemy. Fear of their own leader. That might sound like strength. In the short term, it often is. History is full of rulers who held power through fear. But House of the Dragon has always asked a different question. What happens after people stop following you because they believe in you? And start following you because they're afraid not to? That's where Criston Cole becomes so important. He's no longer the impulsive knight we met in the early seasons. The war has changed him. His victories have become more complicated. His confidence feels quieter. Even when he speaks, there's a sense that experience has replaced certainty. He understands something Aemond still refuses to accept. Every battle creates consequences that no commander can fully predict. And that's exactly where these two characters begin to separate. Aemond still believes power flows from strength. Criston has started to realize that power also depends on judgment. One commands obedience. The other has learned to respect uncertainty. And that contrast may become one of the most important conflicts moving forward. Because Episode 6 quietly suggests that kingdoms don't collapse only when they lose battles. Sometimes, they collapse when fear replaces trust at the very top. Up to this point, we've been talking about what the characters say. But I think Episode 6 becomes even more interesting when you pay attention to what it doesn't say. One thing that stood out to me while re-watching this episode is how few conversations actually solve anything. People argue. They negotiate. They give advice. But almost no one leaves a conversation with a different opinion than they had before. That's a fascinating choice by the writers. Because earlier in the series, dialogue changed the course of events. Characters persuaded one another. Alliances shifted. Decisions were made. In Episode 6, the conversations don't change people. They expose them. Every scene reveals what each character already believes. And how unwilling they are to let go of it. The direction reinforces this idea in subtle ways. Again and again, characters are framed with something separating them. A long council table. A doorway. A corridor. Sometimes another person standing between them. They share the same room. But they rarely share the same perspective. And that's exactly what the episode is trying to communicate. The greatest distance in Episode 6 isn't measured in miles. It's measured in understanding. No one truly sees the world the way the person across from them does. That's why every conversation feels incomplete. Not because the dialogue is unfinished, but because understanding has already broken down. And once that happens, war stops being a conflict that can be negotiated. It becomes a force that keeps moving on its own, without anyone truly controlling where it ends. How does a war reach the point where no one truly understands what's happening anymore? That's the thread connecting every major storyline in Episode 6. Rhaenyra isn't just trying to defeat her enemies. She's trying to protect the kind of queen she believes she should be. Aemond isn't simply trying to win. He's trying to prove that fear is enough to hold a kingdom together. Criston Cole has begun to understand that experience doesn't eliminate uncertainty. It only teaches you how dangerous certainty can be. And almost every conversation in this episode ends the same way. Not with agreement. Not with resolution. But with people walking away more convinced of their own beliefs than before. That's the real tragedy of Episode 6. The war isn't destroying communication. The collapse of communication is what's feeding the war. By the time people stop listening, every decision becomes a reaction. Every reaction creates another misunderstanding. And every misunderstanding pushes the realm one step closer to catastrophe. That's why I think Episode 6 is one of the strongest episodes of the season. Not because of a shocking battle. Not because of a dragon. But because it quietly shows us the exact moment when the conflict stops being driven by strategy and starts being driven by misunderstanding. History is full of wars that began with ambition. But many of them lasted because people stopped understanding each other. And that's exactly what House of the Dragon captures so brilliantly here. The most dangerous weapon in episode 6 isn't a dragon. It isn't a sword. It isn't even an army. It's the growing inability of people to see the world through anyone else's eyes. And once that disappears, peace doesn't end in a single moment. It fades away. One conversation at a time. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives in the House of the Dragon, don't forget to subscribe to Ghostframe. I'd also love to hear your take. What do you think is the real message of episode 6? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next analysis.